Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ask the Educator podcast. This is Kevin Anderson, your host. With me, my co-host Adam Okada, as always. And we are coming to you after our April international webinar with our special guest, Natalie Lind. Natalie, great job on your webinar. You were speaking to me, I felt personally, because that was a topic near and dear to my heart, but I know a lot of people can relate to that. It's all about OR and SPD relationships and building that. And so, Natalie, welcome to the show. I kind of already spoiled the topic, but if you don't mind, just share with the listeners a little bit about yourself. I know you're well known in the industry, but I'm sure there's probably one person in the corner of the world somewhere that doesn't quite know you. So please just share a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, this is the hardest part of speaking for me because but I'll tell you, I'll give my age away and tell you that I've been working in sterile processing in one way or another for 46 years. And I have been a technician, a department manager, a department director. I've been a teacher in the technical college system. I've worked for national magazines, and for the last 19 years, have been with HSPA as their education director. So I like to say I've lived sterile processing from every angle, and it's been the greatest career because I've just got to, I love it, and I've got to see it from different angles. So that's kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, Natalie, you're one of my favorite speakers in the industry. I've told you that a million times. But if you haven't seen Natalie speak, go check out her Healthmark webinar. It's the April 2025 webinar on OR and sterile processing relationships. And in that webinar, you kind of compared those relationships to a journey. So, talk a little bit about that journey analogy and how that analogy relates to those relationships between OR and SPD.
Well, I have for many, many years kind of pictured, and this is something that, you hear around. I didn't make this up, but looked at my life as a journey, and you're always in different places. I had a journey as a parent, and a few years later, I started a journey as a well, many years later, I started a journey as a grandparent. And I think in the sterile processing and OR areas, especially, we're all going towards the same destination, but we kind of get side railed sometimes. We kind of hit potholes and things like that. So I always think no matter what, we always want to make that road smoother, and we always want to make that journey smoother, and we want to get to where we're going. So for me, I look at my career as a journey, and I think every day is a journey if you work in the hospital or in a surgery center, and you
Well,
just hope you keep it on track.
yeah, that analogy certainly applies here in Michigan with potholes, but it also applies in OR and SPDs across the world, I believe. As I told you before we started the show, I've worked in both worlds, both operating room and sterile processing, and there were times throughout my career where things were really good between these two departments and things were really bad between these two departments, and it just kind of ebbed and flowed. And you were always trying to move forward, but there were definitely bumps along the way. um, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges or disconnects in this relationship between the SPD and the OR in your experience?
Disconnects, and there's opportunity for a lot of disconnects. One, I think, is assumption. When we assume, as a sterile processing person, I assume that I know exactly what goes on in the OR and what they need. I've had people on the phone with the OR hanging up the phone and saying they don't need that. Well, I'm pretty sure you're not a surgeon, and there's that disconnect. We assume that we know what's best. We assume that we know more than anybody else. I think, too, stressful situations can really escalate relationship trouble. If it's a bad day, too busy, maybe some traumas coming in or different things like that. Yeah, I think that kind of makes it easier for there to be a disconnect because people react to stress in different ways. And you can say, be calm, but you have to teach yourself that. It doesn't, for most people, doesn't come. I think too is when we make our systems issues personal. A lot of times what goes wrong in our departments is not because this person did this and this person didn't do that. It's because something is wrong in our system. And I think that we all start off, we do the best we can, we make a great system, but our system is always morphing and changing and growing. And so sometimes those growing pains, and they are pains, can get in the way of relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated thing with the OR and SPD. You're right. We're going to the same destination. We all want patient safety, and that's where we need to go. But there's all the kinds of like those disconnects, like you mentioned, between those two departments. And one of the things you talked about in the webinar that I really liked was viewing the OR like a customer, and in return having the OR view SPD as a customer as well. Can you talk a little bit about that concept of kind of like customer viewing or viewing them as a customer?
I will, and if you'll uh, just indulge me for 30 seconds, I really came about that in my first year as a manager. My director sat me down and said, working in this hospital is like renting space in a mall. You have to manage your budget. You have to make sure that, you're not going over with labor or whatever it happens to be. And the OR is your customer. The nursing floors, the ER, all those places, they're your customers. And you need to work so that you make them happy, that you're the department that's servicing them. And I kind of just took that to heart. And I do think that we got to get away from just, well, I'm this and I do that. What am I really here to do? And I want the OR to appreciate what I do. And the best way for me to do that is to do it well. So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
No, that's a great way to put it, and I'm so glad that somebody so early on in your career sat you down and put it that way. That was something that was kind of new to me, idea-wise, when I became an SPD manager, but it makes a ton of sense. And I always kind of wonder, I get this opportunity, and Adam does too a little bit, and maybe Natalie, you have in your career as well, but to kind of go around and see different SPD departments and maybe provide a little consultative service and things like that. And one of the things that I sometimes ask when it comes to, quality management and all of that is whether or not people actually measure their customer satisfaction. Like you get a star rating as a Uber
Yeah.
driver, you get a star rating as an Uber rider, you get Google reviews and all of this stuff. And in the hospital, we tend to review our management and all of that. We have all those surveys that we do, but I've yet to see, to my knowledge, that I can remember, an SP department that actually gave a survey, an actual survey to their OR customers or any of their floor customers or any of that, and measured it over the course of time in order to make improvements. Now, obviously you don't have to do that in order to make improvements. It's just a curious thing to me, wondering if anyone went to those lengths to try and do that. But with that being said, I did want to mention you also touched on something in your webinar that struck me, and that was the education piece. And I feel like one of the things that is missing between these two departments is that opportunity where we can educate each other. I have never, well, in any OR that I've worked in, there's always somebody there who's like, why can't I get these instruments turned around and it's only been, a couple hours, or why does it take so long, or what, and we have a perfect opportunity as technicians or leaders to be like, hey, this is the process. This is how long it takes. We literally can't go any faster than that. And then on top of that, there's many other duties in the department.
Sure.
So there's that, and then with, um, the operating room, they could be educating sterile processing on maybe bone cement. Obviously they have to remove it at the point of use, but to say that they will always get 100% of the bone cement isn't exactly fair either. So we have to be equipped to find it and remove it in sterile processing. But the OR could be like, hey, you know, when we cement, we know there's hundreds of instruments there, but we're actually only using like five of those hundreds of instruments during the cementing process. Maybe you look at these uh, as your usual suspects or whatever, but there's plenty of opportunity there. And I just thought I would use that as maybe an idea for you to share any final thoughts about this OR-SPD relationship. That was one that struck me, but obviously you got a whole career to draw from. You're welcome to share any final thoughts before we end the podcast.
Well, I have always supported surveys, but I have not. I don't really know of hospitals that do that or day surgeries that do that regularly. I'm sure they're out there, but I just haven't run into them. But I know when I was teaching, I always did a dual survey for the SP staff to rate students. And it was on attitude, it was punctuality, it was behaviors, it was all those
Nice.
things that are fairly measurable. And then also the students to rate what, did they feel welcome? Did they have their questions answered and stuff like that? And that made me understand what I needed to do for the next year. So I've done it that way before. And when I did surveys, I spent a short period of time as a consultant and when independent. And when I did hospitals, what I would do is I would survey the OR before I got out there and the SPD. And what I would ask them is, what are 5 things that the other department does well? What are 5 things that they could improve on? And then the rest of the page said, what do you want the other department to know about you? And it was fascinating how, there were just things that they were like, well, they don't know we do this. And the OR was like, they don't understand what it's like when the schedule gets changed and stuff. And I think that's useful. And I don't think it has to be finger pointing. I think it just helps everybody work from where they are to a better place.
Yeah, I love that. And again, go check out Natalie's webinar on OR-SPD communication. There's so many nuggets of wisdom that you packed into an hour. We're recapping this here, but there was so much there, so much content. So Natalie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.